So we're into 2025, and this is the year that No Man's Sky turns 9 years old. Can you believe that? Anyway, with it being a new year, that brings a lot of chatter around what updates we're possibly going to see in No Man's Sky in 2025. Are we going to see another behemoth update like Worlds Part 1? I certainly hope so. Or are we going to be seeing a bunch of slightly smaller yet still significant updates? Well, I'm going to go over that, and I'm also going to go over what both me and you guys are wishing for in terms of updates this year. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get stuck in. Right, first things first, when will the first update of the year come out? Well, I'm reasonably confident, because I'm basing it on previous years, that the first major update drop of 2025 will be sometime in February, because that keeps in with the timing of previous years. I'm not basing it on anything other than that, so call it an educated guess if you will. But what comes as part of this update, of course, remains to be seen. But one thing I'm fairly confident we will be getting at some point this year, not necessarily the first update of the year, however, is a Worlds Part 2. I'm not going to go into too much detail on what I'm expecting for Worlds Part 2 at this very second, because I'm going to go into more detail on that later in this video. But in terms of a possible release date for Worlds Part 2, I would be incredibly surprised. In fact, I would be shocked if it wasn't released this year. We all know Hello Games are constantly busy behind the scenes working on updates for No Man's Sky, and Worlds was the first major update they'd ever done which had a Part 1 attached to the name. Now that indicates there will be a significant further Worlds-based update with new changes coming in the very near future, and it's probably something we should all be very excited about. I know I am. I'll go over some possible additions we could see in that update in just a few minutes, but first, there is of course a major factor that could affect No Man's Sky updates this year. And that is, of course, the Light No Fire effect. We all know that Hello Games have been working on yet another behemoth game by the name of Light No Fire, and have been doing so for a number of years now, but we still don't have a release date or even a release window for it as of the recording of this video. I would think it's highly unlikely that we're going to get it this year, but next year is certainly a possibility. But how does that affect No Man's Sky updates? Well, the obvious answer is there is manpower. Hello Games are well known for being a small team in comparison to a lot of gaming studios, and updating a massive game like No Man's Sky while also working on getting another huge game like Light No Fire ready for release, or even just a showcase, is a huge undertaking with this limited amount of manpower. My prediction here is that we're going to see a very big Worlds Part 2 update this year, and a few smaller updates, perhaps tied in with expeditions, and that'll be it. Now that's not to say that's a bad thing at all. In fact, I'd rather have a few smaller updates if it meant that Light No Fire would get released sooner, but at this point it's pure speculation. Now that I've said that, watch us get a boatload of massive No Man's Sky updates this year. Yeah. But enough of that. What you all want to know is what features could we possibly be getting in 2025 as both standalone updates and as part of a hopefully massive Worlds Part 2 update. Well, I've been chatting with a lot of No Man's Sky players recently, so here are the features that they and myself are both predicting, or at the very least hoping for, this year. One of the most discussed ones when we were talking about it was restoring abandoned systems. Kind of like how we can take over a settlement, build it up and make it profitable, but you'll be doing this on a system-wide scale. We could build and enable trading routes, take advantage of the resources that planets within the system have, link these to other nearby systems to help it grow. And it could also involve creating colonies on these planets as well, and it doesn't actually have to be limited to abandoned systems. We could try and take over outlaw systems from the pirates by driving the pirates out and rebuilding it in a similar vein, or you could go the other way and bring pirates in and make it an outlaw system, or we could take over a system with a really poor economy and build it up and eventually make it to a rich system. You get the idea. Any of these would give a much better feeling of immersion within the systems, and it will begin to make the universe feel more alive, at least in my opinion. Next up on the list is cities, and I've seen this come up quite a few times over the years, and of course we've got settlements in the game, but it seems players want the feature built upon to make them even bigger, or just like cities in general. Like new buildings, more NPCs with different roles within the community, more quests tied to them, more threats and problems you have to deal with, and so on and so on. The list goes on, but the closest thing I've ever seen to a city in the game are player-made bases, of course. And because NPCs never visit player-made bases, they feel a bit dead and abandoned, even though they look freaking awesome. It is worth noting that cities may cause issues with performance on some platforms of the game, more notably on the older consoles like the Xbox One and the PS4, and of course the Switch. So there are potential technical limitations around cities. So I would actually settle for an expansion of the existing settlement feature instead of fully fledged cities, if that was a possibility. This next one is the first of a few possible updates that could be included as a Worlds Part 2, and that is multiple biomes planets. It is one feature that I would like added into the game because it makes it feel just that little bit more realistic, and it makes exploring planets much more interesting from my perspective. Because at the moment, once you've spent a few minutes running around on a planet, you've basically seen all it has to offer. Like, you could fly to the other side of the planet and it will look exactly the same. That is something I've been quite critical a lot of over the years. I know some players would be like, well, multi-biome planets aren't possible, and that's a fair concern, but if you take a look at Light No Fire, that is one giant multi-biomes planet. So why couldn't similar logic be applied to the planets within No Man's Sky? I'm sure there would be some technical difficulties or maybe issues, but if it were possible to have multi-biome planets, I would love that to be included as part of the Worlds Part 2 update. Coming out of a Worlds Part 2 update just for a minute, let's talk about space stations. Now obviously these got a visual overhaul last year, which in my opinion was very much needed and very welcomed, and I think they look great. However, we can still only explore what is effectively the hangar of each space station, and the space stations are massive. I would love to be able to explore more of the space station, and so would a lot of players, I think. Like, other rooms could have all sorts going on in there. There could be a lot of mysteries or valuable loot for us to find, function rooms, and that kind of stuff. On top of this, players also seem to want a proper function for the space station override, and I agree with them. Why would Hello Games add the space station override into the game, but have it do, not much, if barely nothing at all? Surely they have some sort of a plan to extend its capabilities. Is it going to allow us to take over a space station and improve its trading to make us loads of money? Or perhaps we can add things like ship repair bays and a whole load of other expansions to the thing, similar how we can build a base on our freighters at the moment. Basically, a space station expansion would be absolutely lovely. We've already had the visual overhaul, now let's get the function overhaul. Back to another possibly realistic feature of a Worlds Part 2 update, and that would be ocean-based update. Right now, oceans in the game are a little bit meh, basically. They're okay to explore, but there isn't much going on in them, with the exception of the odd crashed ship or the odd abyssal horror down there, but these are very few and far between. Not to mention the depth of the ocean isn't that much. Like, I've barely come across an ocean that goes beyond 100 U in depth, so I would like to see an expansion to the oceans, and I'm talking about deeper oceans, ocean monsters, ocean caves to explore, hell, even underwater colonies or settlements. It could be an underwater settlement feature. But also like more underwater base building parts, the ability to see NPCs exploring the oceans themselves on their own ship or exocraft or whatever. And finally, a brand new water-based exocraft as well, because the Nautilon is a bit slow and boring. A slightly smaller but much requested update now is that of custom Sentinel Interceptor ships. And I think this one is requested a lot because Sentinel ships seem to have a much wider variety in comparison to other ships, so it means the ones we can build will be even more unique and look even funkier. I do think eventually we'll have the ability to build Sentinel ships. When that happens, I do not know, but they're just different to a lot of other ships, so maybe that's why we don't currently have the ability to do that. But I think it would be a nice addition if we eventually got that this year. Back to Worlds Part 2 possible updates. The next 3 could theoretically be included as part of that. And I'll start off by talking about dungeons. Now, I'm kind of just using the name dungeons for dramatic effect. They could be called something completely different. But think of dungeons as on-planet versions of derelict freighters. They'll have their own procedurally generated layout, the same, different enemies to try and get to us, different unique, rare and valuable rewards and whatnot. But I think this would be a really cool expansion, and it would give us something completely new, at least on a planet. And the next one is a new type of planet completely, so gas giants. And you may be thinking, why do we need gas giants? Because you won't be able to land on the feckin' thing. And that's a very valid point. But think of it as well, what you could do with brand new technology for your starships as you're flying through or at least near to them. You could gather the resources, and these gases could be entirely new to the game as well. I just think it kind of gives planets an entirely new dimension if you were to add gas giants into the game. The final potential Worlds Part 2 update, and to be honest, the one I actually want the most, is brand new and an overhaul of planet points of interest. Because right now, the points of interest on planets, on any planet, are pretty much exactly the same. I'm talking about trading outposts, resource deposits, abandoned buildings, ancient ruins, and so on and so forth. There are also very, very small points of interest with not much going on, and it takes you no more than 30 seconds to explore the entire thing. I'd love to see a few things, and the first would be more variety in terms of the visuals of existing points of interest. And I wish for them to be a lot bigger with more to discover in them or more to do in them. Like, for everything that is wrong with Starfield, their planet points of interest were pretty damn big, and there was a lot you could do and a lot you could find, and a lot of NPCs and stuff you could kill or whatever. Yes, they're all copy and pasted, but at least I could spend a bit of time exploring them without being done in 30 seconds, like in No Man's Sky. On top of that, I would love some totally brand new points of interest for us to stumble across. These can be literally anything ranging from pirate outposts, especially in outlaw systems. Like, are you telling me that in an outlaw system, the only thing that distinguishes it from other systems is the space station itself? Please, we need more pirate-based points of interest on the planets within these systems. And secondly, what about expansions to the ancient ruins that we already have? Like, ancient libraries could be an example, giving us more lore and history of No Man's Sky. And as I've already mentioned as well, underwater settlements could be a possibility. We could also have shipbuilding outposts on planets, starship scrapyards, hidden technology, the list goes on and on. Actually, are there any points of interest you'd love to see added to the planets in the game? Let me know in the comments below. There are a few smaller updates that were also discussed, so let me cover those quickly as well, because in some cases they are just as important as the big shiny new major updates. And the top one, which was mentioned multiple times, was an inventory sorting function. And I can appreciate the need for that, because when your inventory is maxed out, it's a bit of a ball ache trying to find a specific resource that you're after. I know you can apply filters and highlight things, but being able to sort them, say in alphabetical order or whatever, would be a nice quality of life improvement. Next up would just be more base building parts. I think this would just be great as an ongoing smaller update, so we can have new base building parts a few times every year so we can make even more unique bases. I love showcasing player bases, and I can't imagine it's too difficult for Hello Games to add in new base building parts, so the bigger that category of part gets, the better in my opinion. And speaking of bases, wouldn't it be great if you could see NPCs visiting your base, say if it has a landing pad included? Right now you could build the biggest, most amazing base you've ever seen, and you'd never have any NPCs visiting it. I think that would be a great little addition to the area of the game. You could even have the option to turn it off if you really don't want them visiting, but it'd be something nice and makes the universe feel more alive. And last, but by no means least, we need bug fixes. It's pretty well known that there are a few bugs that rear their heads when new updates come out, and obviously there's some lingering around, and then there are subsequent patch updates to fix these and so on, but there are always a few bugs lingering around, as I said, some more noticeable than others, but it would be nice if Hello Games would give us a patch at some point this year which solely focuses on bug fixing. Because after all, who wants to play a game which has a bunch of bugs in it? Whew, list done. Now, I get that was quite a lot of information to take in, right? But one final thing I want to know, folks, is what are you really hoping to see in No Man's Sky this year? What features would you absolutely desperately want added to the game? Or something you want enhancing or improving? Let me know in the comments section below. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you are still here, it would be totally awesome if you could support my channel by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. You can now become a channel member as well. And as always, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in my next one.